Welcome to this week's video. It's going to be a little bit of a practical video covering female training techniques, specifically of the legs, and centered around why your knees hurt when you're training. Specifically, why they hurt when you train, what to avoid if they hurt, general technique tips when it comes to your lower body training, and how to fix it so you can train as if you never had a sore joint in your life. And even if you don't have knee problems, you might have problems with your hips, feet, ankles, or lower back, and this is also going to tie into this video. So stick around if you want to learn more about that. So many women experience knee pain after they start exercising, usually not straight away, but within a couple of months from beginning. When this happens, we'll think, oh no, I can't exercise because I have bad knees. It's never going to work for me, or you're not really sure what exercises you can and can't do without making the problem worse. So the problem with sore knees is that one, it interferes with your training, so it makes it a lot harder to get results. And two, it can lead to injuries. So if you have a problem with your knees, or even like I said before, your hips, lower back, ankles, or feet, then this actually signals a larger problem, which is what we're covering in this video. And by getting on top of this, you're actually going to get amazing results in the gym, be injury free, and get all of the benefits that weight training has to offer, which is increased nervous system capacity, bone density, muscle mass, improved metabolism, better ability to handle carbohydrates, better sleep, better mood, and all these other magical things. So I've been coaching for over 20 years now, and women specifically full-time for 12 years. And I've never met a woman that didn't need this corrected in her training. Most of them had knee problems, but not all. But not one person had all of the things I'm describing in this video in line when they started training, and it was the correcting of these issues that actually accelerated their results. And it's a formula that I repeat with every single person, and it is the formula I learned myself because me personally, I used to run like a maniac as a teenager, and I have no cartilage in my knees left because I wore it all down. Didn't know anything about this 25 years ago, and that's what got me into weight training in the first place. So by correcting all of these things, I learned to weight train. My knees now never hurt as long as I continue to train and don't let anything slip. So let's start with why your knees hurt, and that is because you are a woman. It's that simple. You can't change that, but we can work with that. So in being a woman and wanting to do lots of physical activity, the number one thing that we actually really need to accept is that we are not built for power and speed. Our purpose is childbirth. We don't actually have the natural structure that is supportive of weight training and developing strength, power, and speed. It's just not what we're here for. And you just want to remember that so much of the industry, sports and health, is based on men, mostly military age men, and these people have completely different body structures to us. So when we work with our structure rather than against it, that's when we start getting the results and we stop hurting ourselves. So I'm going to show you exactly what's going on with the structure, and then I'm going to show you how to fix it. So first and foremost, I'm going to explain to you what happens to the female body as we go through puberty. So before we reach that phase of life, we're actually quite similar to boys. So we're very straight up and down. We have a wider waist, narrow hips, and everything's kind of straight from here down. We have really strong glutes, we have really strong abdominals, we're just built that way. But then what happens is puberty kicks in, and then we get flooded with all those hormones, our hips start to widen, we grow breasts, and the posture actually changes. So first thing that happens, so from the front, what happens is the hips kind of widen, the waist stays quite narrow. This is for most women, by the way. I'm not talking about everybody because everyone has a different structure. So the hips widen, and then from the side, what happens is these kind of grow, and then it pulls everything down like this, and then to compensate, this kind of comes out like that, and we end up with this sort of lordotic posture. So the pelvis is tilted forward, and there's a reason for that, and that is to make babies. So it's by design, it's supposed to be like that, but if you train on that structure, then what happens is you're actually going to create pressure on your joints because we're not supposed to be doing that. And as our structure changes, certain muscles actually start to let go. So in women, it's usually the lower abdominals and the glute muscles and the hamstrings and the back muscles. So as our chest kind of grows, we end up doing this, and so all of this kind of weakens. And then as our hips widen, our glutes kind of get disengaged and our abs kind of disengage. And this is mostly because we're not really trained to maintain that strength in that phase of life. So, and if you think about it, you're at school and you're sitting all day. So this is one of the biggest problems that everybody has, women and men, is that we sit all day. And if you sit all day, this becomes really short and tight. your hamstrings become really tight, your glutes give up, your abs give up, and you actually lose that whole structure regardless. For women, it's something that starts in puberty, but for everybody, it's very common for people who work in office environments. But luckily for us, the human body is amazing, and we have a group of muscles called the posterior chain, which is your back, glutes, hamstrings, and abdominals. And these muscles, when connected as one functional unit, will help your body build strength, correct posture, and start getting results. It also protects your joints because it's the stabilizing muscle group of the body, and it is very powerful. So if you do squatting or deadlifting or bench press or even overhead pressing, all of these movements, Olympic lifts, it's all based on the posterior chain. So the stronger that is, the stronger you get, and the faster you get all of those benefits. But if the posterior chain is weak, then it's your joints that will take the load. And in women, like I said, during puberty, everything kind of lets go and weakens and tightens in other places. And we're training on a dysfunctional structure. So all of the things that are already tight become tighter, and they're actually hindering the posterior chain from engaging during the exercise. And that's where the pain starts. And we'll get to that in a little bit. I'll show you what happens structurally, but I'll just quickly run off the stages that you need to go through in order to correct it. So first of all, we want to assess the posture. Second of all, we want to restore nervous system signaling to those muscles that have disengaged, and I'm going to tell you what they are in a minute. Thirdly, we want to strengthen those muscles individually. Fourthly, we want to get them kind of working together as one functional unit. And lastly, we just want to focus on getting strong and staying on top of the progress that we've made. So this wouldn't be a very good knee strength video if I did not tell you what you should avoid whilst trying to fix this problem. And it's simple, you just don't want to run, and you also want to avoid all plyometric exercises. So that would be anything dynamic like jumping, so box jumps, lunge jumps, or burpees, or long jumps, things like this, because it is those high impact activities that are going to cause the problem. And you also want to avoid things like squatting and lunging and deadlifting just until you understand the technique and you have your hips nice and loose so that you can get the right muscles working. And just one other point, which is really important, is that you have to train with flat shoes. So every time you train legs, flat shoes or no shoes. You don't want to have any padding, you don't want to be wearing sneakers, because what this does is it interferes with the nervous system signaling. So as your feet are touching the ground, and if you know anything about grounding, this will make a lot of sense to you. Your body kind of understands that it's connected to the ground. This activates the nervous system, and when we're trying to build the posterior chain, this is actually going to help with that signaling. And also by nature, our glutes are supposed to be strong. So when we are connected to the floor with our foot, without any cushioning in between, then this actually sends better signals and makes it easier to use the glutes in the first place. So I personally like to wear Metcons, which is a Nike, which is this shoe here. You can see. So specifically designed for weight training. There's also Reebok Nanos, or you can literally just get like a $20 flat shoe from Kmart. The most important thing is that your feet are flat on the floor. Okay, so I've got my flat shoes on, and we're going to go over the posture just really quickly. So I'll show you what you want to check in your own physique. So first of all, you want to check your foot alignment. So you should have your ankle directly above the mid-center of your foot. So you don't want to have it in here, and you don't want it to be bowed out here. You want to have a slight arch in your foot. If your arches are flat, then usually what will happen is your ankles will be caving in. And in this type of instance, it's very often you will get prescribed orthotics, and what that does is actually just push everything back up into alignment. But it doesn't strengthen the glute muscles or the abs, which is exactly what you're supposed to be doing. And then you just want to check the position of your patella, which is your kneecap. So if your kneecap is kind of in here, which is what I most often see, then this means you have an alignment problem. So the kneecap should be directly over the center of the knee and pretty much over the top of your foot. So for women, the wider your hips, the more likely it is that your knee is actually going to be rotated in. And then another thing that's really common is having your kneecap actually pointing straight ahead, but having the feet pointing out like this, which is the exact same problem. It just means that you're actually tight through the back of the hips as well as the front of the hips. And then from the side, what you're checking is just this whole tilt, this tilt here. So you're making sure you're not too far forward, and you're making sure you're not too arched back. So Ideal posture is kind of straight like this, and when you're stronger, it's all going to align up for you. So now that you've checked your posture and worked out what's going on, maybe you notice a couple of misalignments there, now you want to start correcting it. So this involves loosening certain muscles which have been overcompensating and reminding other muscles that have been overpowered by the wrong ones what their job is, and then get them back online again. So for women, mostly it's the middle back, which is like in here. It's the glutes and it's the lower abs. As they switch off during puberty, like I described before, the body kind of forgets that they're there. So a lot of the time, not even getting a nervous system signal, let alone actually supporting your body structure while you exercise. Because that's all pulling it in, it's kind of doing the opposite of what your glutes and abs would do. So when this one's tight, it's actually disabling your abdominal muscles, and when all of this is tight, it's disabling your glute muscles. So by releasing it all with the ball and with the stretches, you're now able to get your leg bones actually in a position for the glutes and the abs to work again. So most people are very surprised once they release their psoas muscle and they start doing ab exercises, suddenly they can actually feel their abs, or they'll stand up and actually feel like they might fall backwards, because now their abs have to engage, because that has always been their job. It's just that it was hindered by a tight psoas muscle, and the same is for the glutes. So the ITB, which is the band going down the side of your leg, and the hip flexors here are all pulling everything inwards, and because your knees are now on the inside of the body, the glutes actually are not in a position to pull it all back out again. So you release all of this, which then kind of straightens things up, but then you have to strengthen the glutes to hold it out in position in the first place. So we can release muscles by using a foam roller, a lacrosse ball, or a softball. So for example, lacrosse ball has to be a lacrosse ball. You can get these online, super cheap now, and a softball. So the first thing you want to release, and I will chuck them on the screen, is the ITB band, which is down the side of your leg here. So that gets tight and pulls your kneecap out of line. And you do that with a roller. Then you want to release your psoas, which is with this ball here, and that is the muscle up in here in the back of your pelvis. This is one that actually pulls you forward like that. And then most often you have to release your piriformis, which is a muscle that stems across your glute here. And you want to also stretch your piriformis and stretch your psoas. That's a bit of a fast track way to start getting your hips released if you find that when you try and restore the nervous system signaling that it doesn't work, because it might mean that you're too tight. Priming exercises you want to do, and there are two super simple ones, and that is a transverse contraction and an X band walk. You can do the band walks using this band, this type of thing, or a booty band, very popular. I'm going to link down below a document with these exercises linked in them so you can watch the tutorials and work out how to do them. Okay, so now that we have looked at our posture and we have learned what priming exercises to do and what muscles we need to release in order to start getting things working again, we want to do phase 3, which is to start strengthening the muscles individually. And I'm talking again about the posterior chain. So we want to strengthen the abs, the hamstrings, the back, and the glutes. And I'll pop those muscle groups up on the screen. So the exercises that I would normally use for this is a glute bridge progression, a hip abduction progression, banded heel drops, some reverse crunches for the abs, some hamstring curls, and some seated rows. So the seated row might feel like it's not exactly linked to the hips, but it is, because it's going to help you tie the posterior chain from the back, right from up here, all the way down through to your feet. And then we have phase 4, which is to start getting those muscles talking to each other in compound movements. So a compound movement is when you have more than one joint working at one time. So this is things like a squat, a lunge, a leg press, a step up, or a deadlift, or RDL or similar. So the key for those exercises is to make sure that the whole posterior chain is working at the same time. So the back is tight, the spine is straight, the abs are engaged, the glutes are working, and the hamstrings are taking the load that they should be taking. So most women will find that because their hips are so tight and their posterior chain is so weak, that every time they train, they mostly feel their lower back, their quads, which is the front of the thigh, and their knees, and they don't actually feel the exercise through the whole body. So when you're doing it properly, you should feel it through the entire body, and this is what's going to get you those results. Well, let's go over just quickly some lower body techniques so you can assess your own self in the gym and see if you're doing things correctly. So we can break these movements up into 2. So on one side we have pressing movements, that's like leg pressing, lunging, squatting, and step ups, and then we have hip hinge movements, which is deadlifting. Both of these are the primary way that you would strengthen your legs. So let's start with a pressing movement. The first thing you want to be mindful of is rotating your knees out always. So your knees always have to rotate out and from the hip. So muscles here that you're going to be priming in earlier phases of this process should now be able to be felt. You should be able to feel that is activated and working and full of blood, ready to go. And what you want to do is actually always, from this muscle, you want to rotate your knees out. So you're not just pushing them out and trying to force against gravity, you're actually using your glute muscles, which is designed for this exact purpose, to rotate out. So every time you do a pressing motion, your knees should always be over your outside toe. That just means that they should rotate out, and as you come down, they stay out. So you want to avoid this type of thing because that is going to compound the tight hips and hurt your knees. You always want to brace your abs like you've been punched in the stomach. So you think like tucking them in like this, rotating from the hip. So now this is engaged and this is engaged, and then that's when you would start your movement. And with your foot, you always want to keep your heel, the outside of your foot, and your big toe connected to the floor at all times. And for something like a squat, you want your chest to always fall forward as much as it has to. So if you're coming down, you actually want your chest to come down like this. So what people will often try and do is stay really upright like this. So you actually want your chest to fall forward as much as you need to, because it's the extension through the glute that's going to help them engage properly. And lastly, you just want to keep your head neutral. So you don't ever want to kind of look up or look to the side or, you know, look around. You don't want your eyes to be moving. You just keep your head really straight and focus on your feet and your knees rotating out and keeping your abs tight, and your training will feel much better. And then with a hip hinge, which is essentially this movement where you're coming down this way, so it's a deadlift, you always just want to keep, again, your abs really tight. Your hips push back, weight should go into your hamstrings, and this part of your back should remain connected and your head straight. So it's literally just coming down like that. You don't want to fall down this way. You don't want your knees to bend. So now that's a pressing motion, not a hip hinge. So the hinge is coming back like that. You should feel it in your hamstrings, and then you're coming back up and just making sure that your whole posterior chain remains connected. So those are just some general pointers. Again, like I said, I will link them down below so that you can download and have a look yourself. This is also just a general introduction to leg problems. This is a very detailed process, but it should at minimum give you an idea of how to train properly, what things should look like, what things should feel like, and give you some motivation to actually put the work in to loosen your hips and strengthen them in the way that they are designed to work. So just remember that as women, although we are not built naturally for strength, power, and speed, we absolutely can achieve that, and we can achieve amazing results without training if we take the time to do those things. So hopefully that inspires you and gives you a little bit of hope. And just lastly, before we go, I forgot phase 5, which is to just get really strong. So once everything starts to feel good, you just want to keep adding weight and do things like barbell squats, lunges, barbell deadlifts, and stuff like that. And if you just did those 3 exercises and just focus on getting stronger at those, whilst keeping the rest of your body really strong, your results will go through the roof. Knee pain will be a thing of the past. Orthotics can be thrown in the bin. You won't have to roll forever, because once you get strong, this posture doesn't actually divert back to where it was unless you stop training. So just to recap, first of all, you want to check your posture and just see what's going on there. Secondly, you want to restore the nervous system signaling to your glutes and your abs and your back and your hamstrings. And sometimes in order to do that, you need to stretch and release muscles that are hindering and taking over for those muscles. Thirdly, you want to get your abs, back, hamstrings, and glutes strong individually. Fourthly, you want to start bringing those muscles together in compound movements. And last but not least, the 5th one is to get strong and enjoy the process. There are so many benefits to training. I have seen it for years and years. That is why I believe in it so much. Nothing I love more than helping women understand how powerful their bodies can be and really get the benefits from weight training. So I hope you try it all out. Let me know if you do. If you have any comments, leave them below. Otherwise, I will see you next week. Thanks for watching.